Hello and welcome you crazy people to Tabletop Oddity. My name is Jay and today we're going to be looking at some of the best and the worst rules of, I almost said Star Wars, Kill Team, of Warhammer Kill Team. And yeah, keep in mind that this is an opinion-based thing. There is no factually best and worst rule. There might be some like rules that maybe need clarifying and stuff like that. But I'm actually going to be looking at gameplay choices that the developers have made and talking about why I like some of them and why I don't like some of them. So like, don't hate, it's just an opinion. So we'll start with the worst. We'll get the worst out the way. What I don't like is the rule that says where you shoot from. Not really because it's where you shoot from, it's the fact that intervening terrain that you're like closing up against could in theory cause obscured. This one's a little bit hard to explain, so I'll explain it with a diagram. Right, so we know if you're shooting at somebody, they're in the open like that, it's not obscured. We know if any part, the main part of the body, like not the gun, the actual like that person's leg, is obscured, therefore shooting at that person is obscured. Now imagine that you're that bottom person, this person here, oh well I didn't do a very good job, this person shooting at this person. Now you might be like, well obviously that's not obscured, but isn't this part of this body obscured, so if they were to shoot from there it would be obscured? Yes it would, which is fine because the rule actually is that you pick the most like, well you can pick any part of the body, and when I say the body it can't be like, you know, a bit of the little metal bit off his backpack. It has to be like his arms, his head, his legs. So, and you pick the best part of it, which is fine. So you shoot from this guy, this part of him here, and that would have a straight line to that guy all over that guy. And you might be like, well, there's no problem there. That's true. What I would like is something that maybe Star Wars Legion does, which says if you're touching the terrain and you have line of sight, as in any part of the model can see him, then you just ignore that terrain. I just prefer that as a rule. This possibly leads to like inconsistencies, like if you're trying to shoot through a small grill, if your weapon can see, but maybe your head can't, you can still see or not, depending on, I can't remember if weapons are included or not, but I just find it a bit messy. I would just be like, if you're up against that, then you're in cover, but you don't, your opponent doesn't get covered by the fact that you're in cover. It's just a rule I would personally have liked. It functions perfectly fine, don't get me wrong. I just don't like that wording of it. I find that's going to be a little bit awkward to be like, well, my head can see you, therefore you're not obscured. But even though you're in the open. Whatever, that's just my personal taste on that specific one. I completely understand that some people might like that. I just don't. The next one is pistols. Now I know that this is a hang up from 40k and people will probably be like, Jay, you can't get rid of this. But I would have just liked pistols not to be able to be shot in combat. I know that would have strongly devalued the pistol because it's historically been able to be shot into like in combat. So the actual rule is if I'm in combat with somebody and I've got a pistol, I can shoot the nearest model, which is probably the model that's in combat. You still can't shoot into combat as far as I know if you're not in combat, which is possibly a bit janky as well, but I need to clarify that before I was confidently able to say that. But I think it's just one of those things that is very easy to forget and possibly could have just been negated. You know, maybe just price it appropriately, that pistols are next to useless. Well, they're not next to useless, but do you know what I mean? Like they are worth it if you can shoot into combat, if you're in combat, because you're basically getting a free attack. So they're 100% worth it. I just don't like having things where they're not very easy to remember, and that's why I sort of dislike pistols. An alternative to pistols is very difficult because you either make the pistol really strong, so it's worth the points, and you can only use it in the shooting phase, and while you're not in combat, or you do some other weird thing. So I don't have a solution here. I just think that this is a very, very simple thing that people will forget, and I just would have liked to seen it without it. The next one is I really don't like the fact that you can charge somebody you can't see. I just find that mind-blowingly illogical. Now, I guess in one sense, I can sort of understand it, that you can start your charge and eventually you'll see them, but why are you charging if you don't know where they are? Like, I just have a hard time representing that in my head. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. You have a vague sense of where they are, or maybe line of sight is not necessarily conceptually that you don't know where they are, it's just that you couldn't possibly hit them if you shot them. Either way, if somebody's completely behind a wall, you can in theory charge them and be within an inch through the wall, neither party being able to even attack. I just don't like that. I feel like that needs a... I don't mind the fact I don't really mind the fact that you can charge without line of sight. Like, I can live with it, but being able to like charge people and then not being able to attack and stuff like that, I find janky, if I'm honest, but that's just me. So those are 3 rules things that I'm not really a huge fan. They function, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they are broken. They function the way they are. I just would have liked not to have had them because of either like people are going to forget them, or it just sounds a bit weird or acts a bit weird when you play it. I have a 4th thing which sort of fits in this category, is that there's no wound tokens. You're expected to do it on your data card, and I would have just preferred to have a wound token like Star Wars Legion. And speaking of Star Wars Legion, the way I'm going to represent this is I'm going to steal the wound tokens from Star Wars Legion, put them in my kill team box and just use them. I mean, I'm just making my own wound tokens basically, but I think it makes sense because some units don't even have multiple wounds, and your data card can track it. I just think like having it visually on the board would give people a little bit easier sense of understanding the table at first glance. So those are the bad ones, and I've got to be quite honest, the bad ones aren't that bad. They're not too bad. I actually think really I'm sort of nitpicking a little bit. There are some rules that almost certainly we need an FAQ to clear up some things, and I've tried to sort of stay away from that, like falling into combat with grab shoots or whatever the hell it ends up being. I've tried to stay away from them, and overall I am very happy about the rules, so do not get me wrong. And then we'll move on to the best. So the reasons I actually really like it: I like the I go, you go. I do one unit, you do another unit. Sweet, perfect, absolutely fantastic. That combined with having different phases, I actually really like in Legion it's I do all of my one unit, then you do all of your one unit, then I do all of my one unit. In Kill Team it's I do all my movement, you do all of your movement, then I shoot, you shoot, I shoot, you shoot, I do my combat, you do your combat. I quite like that. I think that's a nice little, it's a twist on the rules on that as a concept. And it's a nice little compromise between the two. And to be fair, the I go, you go thing is the reason I will probably not play 40k, because I don't like having to do everything and then you do everything. I don't find it very interesting. It's boring to wait, and I find it really like can swing the game one way too like too much basically. So I don't really like that. I quite like, moving on to the next one, I quite like having a kill team roster. So having the fact that I can pick a roster between 3 and 20, take it to an event, and then pick and choose depending on the match or who I'm facing. It gives you ample choice to be like, oh, well, I want a shooty army, I want a melee army, I want somebody who's good against psychers or whatever. You have that choice. Now, I have seen people say that this actually unfairly hurts like horde armies, maybe like orcs, because you can't pick and choose, you can't detail it as precisely. But hopefully that's part of the balance of the game. Hopefully they have considered that, they're aware of that, and that includes the pointages and stuff like that. Is fine. Like, if you've got a horde army, then you probably should design around being good against everything anyway, because you've got that kind of choice. So I'm a big fan of that rule. I just really like it. It sort of it gives tactics before the game, and I like that. So yeah. Meh. The third rule in this sense that I quite like is random charge distance. I think if you have like, I keep going back to Legion because this is the game that's in my head, but in Legion you just move into combat when it's your turn and you're in combat. That's fine, it works perfectly well there, but I quite like having that like, oh, I need 12, I'm gonna have to roll a 12 and get this monumental charge, or you just roll a 3 and you fail completely miserably and it's fine. And it's funny, I like having a bit of randomness in your games. Obviously it's randomness, but we all know that probability of 2 dice is more like your average is 7, for example, and 12 is 1 in 36. So you've got to play to those probabilities. It's worth keeping that in mind. True random is bad. Not random enough can also be bad, and that's why I really like that as the rule. And the last one that I'm going to be talking about right about now is something that I praised. I think I praised Star Wars Legion for at the time, but I like the fact you can just measure distances anytime you want. There's no qualms about that. So yeah, you start off, how far is that guy away from me right now? He's 22 inches away from me. And that's interesting because imagine you have a 20-inch weapon, I have a 22-inch weapon. I might put myself specifically in that gap, and I don't have to guess the 22 inches away. I can literally just get the tape measure out and check. It just cuts down arguments, basically. If you have free will to measure whatever you want whenever you want, which it says pretty early on in the rulebook, then fantastic. I like things that take away possible arguments. Now, I can see why a game like X-Wing doesn't let you do that, because part of the whole thing is that you get to, you've got to visualize it, predict your moves, make where exactly you think you're going to end up. Are you going to just be able to turn before you go off the board? Makes perfect sense there. In a game like this, when you've got measure, like you've already got a tape measure, it like, oh, if I just swing it a little bit that way, I'll get a good indication possibly of how far I am away. And I don't like it. I like just having free will, free reign to do whatever the hell you like. Well, there's my, like, it's for the best, for the worst, and not really worst in the sense of the wound token one, but that's just an opinion, I guess. Are there any rules that are sticking out to you one way or the other? You're like, I really like this rule, or you think the other one is dog turd? I actually don't think any rule is, as I just said, dog feces. I just think that because you've had to whittle down 40k into a more skirmish game, there's some like historical lingering over rules. Like, for example, the pistols don't really make sense. Cover and where you shoot from and obscured like that, that's tricky in almost every game. Like, lots of games have problems with that. It's not exactly anything new. I'm not even sure there's a proper good way of doing that. Charging without line of sight, yeah, I don't like that at all. I can't lie about that one. I think that's the most egregious to me. So as I said, let me know your thoughts. That's the end of the video. Thank you to anybody who supports me on Patreon. I'm like 4 for 4 right now. I've mentioned this on this is like all the videos that I've done recently, and I'm very happy about myself mentioning it. I'm pleased with myself. But I'm more happy with anybody who does choose to support me on Patreon. It does honestly mean quite a lot. And you can just like or subscribe if you're not subscribed. Please do one of those two things. Please, please, for the love of my sanity, please do that. But definitely, almost certainly, have a beautiful day, and goodbye. Bye.